So before you tonight, we have a public hearing for a proposed amendment, and this is to insert residential uses as an allowed ground floor use within the central business zoning district. Just give you a little bit of background on this proposal before you tonight. Staff was recently contacted by a building owner in the North Main Street corridor, kind of on the edge of the central business to motor business zoning district. It happened to be the owner of the CJ's building on Main Street. He was interested in converting the entire building to a residential use, currently a club use on the ground floor, some type of ballroom event space on the second floor, and then the basement. A portion of that is conducting a bar use down there as well. And so the issue you have in the central business zoning district is that residential uses are allowed, but they have to be above or behind commercial uses in a manner that don't interrupt that commercial frontage along the adjacent street, and in this case, Main Street. And so we talked through that. Staff had an opportunity to take a look at other properties within the central business zoning district, identified that there are several ones that are currently being used as residential uses, and ones that may have originally been designated or originally built as residential uses at the time of construction, still used that way today, and some that were never intended to be kind of the retail commercial space that you had intended on Main Street in the central business district. They may just not work well as that retail commercial space on the ground floor. So taking a look at the central business zone, in the center of your screen here, it's in the purple. You have all the buildings that I've highlighted in red on the outskirts. These are all residential properties. I did highlight the CJ's building on North Main Street so you can see the proximity to the motor business zone there to the north.
Both are completely residential only properties.
Correct,
okay.
Except for the CJ's building right now. So the rest of them, yeah, you have numerous ones here on the east side of Washington Street. You have some here. This is right across the street from City Hall on 2nd Street. Those buildings are currently used as residential, and they were originally built as residential structures. You also have numerous ones along the 6th Street corridor here, Allman-Asbury area, which just happen to be in the central business zone. They're currently used as residential and constructed as such. Taking a look at the front of the facade of the CJ's building, looking at the ground floor, it's really hard to identify what would be the ground floor in this building just because you have a daylighted basement. Really, this is the level of the transition from the ground floor to the first floor. Once you walk in the doors, you either go up or down. Really not conducive to what we're striving for in the downtown central business district with the buildings that were originally constructed. Maybe they have floor-to-ceiling windows, which would be more conducive to ground floor retail commercial space on those buildings. So it would be a challenge to convert this to strictly a commercial space at the very front of the building. Looking at the property across the street, this was originally developed, I believe, as the Hotel Del Norte, currently being used as residential use. And so you'd have a challenge here converting that to commercial space, mainly because of those two steps in the front. You'd have to do some type of ramp to get ADA access, and it'd be hard, looks similar to residential townhouses that you may see within other areas of the city or other cities. This is just a same shot of that intersection on 1st and Main. And then you have some properties, these are just on the outskirts. This is A and Jackson. Looking southeast, a couple of these structures were recently torn down here, but this whole block is primarily residential, and these were originally constructed as residential dwellings. And then this is on 7th Street, right next to the Ocularium. This is Tim Gressback's law office, and this building's kind of gone back and forth between residential and commercial use, professional office type use. They ended up getting a variance a few years ago in order to allow ground floor residential to convert the entire building back to a residential use. And so it's kind of, during that time, it had gone residential. I believe it had gone back to a professional office. And now it's Tim Gressback's law office, and he's sunk quite a bit of money into the property. Another view, this is Tim Gressback's on the right here, and then there's the ocularium on the left, another property that could transition back and forth between residential, originally constructed as a dwelling, but has been used as the Palouse ocularium for quite some time. And these are properties that are located on 6th Street. You can see Washington Street off here in the distance. These were one time an appraiser's office and have since kind of gone back and forth between professional office and residential use. You know, these properties are located at the periphery of the central business zoning district, adjacent to residential zones and uses, and so naturally you have the transition between one or the other. So what staff's proposing tonight is to insert under conditional uses, so this would be reviewed as part of a conditional use permit through the Board of Adjustment, insert language to allow residential uses located on the ground floor which are not located behind commercial uses, with specific consideration given to preservation of retail frontages and or suitability of building for ground floor commercial use. And so this would give the Board of Adjustment some direction as to what we're looking for here. Suitability of the building, if it's like the CJ's building, it's not originally intended. I think it was originally built as the Elks Lodge, and so it really wasn't originally intended for that prime retail commercial frontage, and it may present some challenges converting that, and give the Board of Adjustment a little bit of direction there, as well as maybe we don't want strictly residential building right at the heart of downtown within Main Street and 2nd or 3rd Street, and so it'd be able to have the Board of Adjustment take a look at that and obviously take into consideration staff's recommendation there as well. So with that, our recommendation is to conduct a public hearing, and after considering any testimony presented, approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary. And I'd certainly be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Dan?
So Mike, going back to we had the homes on Jackson Street, that some of them have been removed. I remember back, and the only reason I really remember is because I helped put the fire out, but that former house that they turned into 3 apartments on Washington, and then they wanted to build apartments back, but it was, it didn't fit the zone. So that use wasn't grandfathered in. They had to apply for a variance or conditional use permit in that case, correct? So kind of going back to that, so these houses on Jackson, if they're removed, does that remove the residential use of that property? Is that now commercial property that they would have to come back and get a conditional use permit for?
Correct. Yeah, right now as it currently exists within our code, if those were to burn down or be destroyed, more than 60% of the replacement value at the time of destruction, those would require to be some type of commercial component at the front of the structure, and so they wouldn't be able to be rebuilt as strictly residential, like a single-family dwelling. This would allow the opportunity to go through the conditional use permit process and be able to achieve that.
Okay, now if I can continue. So somebody does, we do pass this ordinance, and somebody does get a conditional use permit to build a residential structure there, or whatever, but then that place burns down. Does the theoretically conditional use permit burn down with it?
Conditional use permit runs with the land.
Okay.
So they would have
could
that.
still build another house.
They would have that in perpetuity, as long as everything was consistent with what they had submitted for the application for the conditional use permit. Then correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Art?
As a follow-up to that, would a residence built under a CUP therefore still need to maintain the potential for commercial use on the ground floor, street-facing?
Not if they got a conditional use permit for ground floor residential. As it exists right now, if they didn't get a conditional use permit, or if this ordinance was not passed, say a strictly residential building burnt down, the only way they'd be allowed to rebuild the residential component of that would be to insert some commercial adjacent to the street frontage.
So the clause that says residential uses located on the ground floor which are not located behind commercial uses with specific consideration given to the preservation of retail frontage, so that wouldn't apply if you built new with a CUP for residential use, you wouldn't have to maintain the potential for commercial frontage.
You wouldn't, no. That's to give some direction about existing retail frontages in the area where that building's located at.
What this ordinance does is for Board of Adjustment, it gives them a way of looking at it without being a black and white issue, so they can make the decision on a variance without going against what an ordinance would say. Am I correct on that, Mike? After being on the Board of Adjustments for 4 years and chaired it for a couple of years, those are the problems that the Board of Adjustments run into. It's like, this is what it says, it's black and white, and you can't do it. And that's why basically this ordinance is coming in front of us, so that they can look at that on a per basis thing. It's not black and white, but they can look at each one of them individually and make a decision if it makes sense or not.
Correct.
It's just
So
adding
that's
that
basically what we're talking about here. Other comments for Mike from the rest of council? Thank you, Mike.
you.
I will now open the public hearing. It is 7:56, and I will take testimony in favor. Seeing nobody rush to the podium, I will take general comments or those opposed to this ordinance change. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing at 7:56 and 1/2. Up to the council.
I was just going to say, I like this one because it mitigates some of the nonconformities that exist, so that people's property use can be preserved, and that having that CUP process involved really mitigates some issues that might be associated with people just plopping down a use regardless. So I like the way this one is written.
Well, as I said earlier, one of the things for Board of Adjustment, they have to go by what ordinances say, because they cannot change an ordinance because they don't have the power to do that. Only this council up here can do that. So this gives them the avenue to take something. If you look at something on Board of Adjustment that completely makes sense, but the ordinance doesn't spare that, it just doesn't happen. So, Dan.
I'd make a motion that we approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and to be read by title and published by summary.
I'd second that.
Okay, we've got a motion by Dan and a second by Art to approve the ordinance under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and it be read by title and published by summary. Everybody understand where we're at with this? John, I'll start with you.
Aye.
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 Okay, and that passes 5-4, no abstentions and no against. And this is ordinance number 2015-14.
14. 12. We were just looking on the website. It's 12.
2015-12?
Yes.
I had not wrote anything down yet. Thank God. Okay, this is ordinance 2015-12, an ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the amendment of Moscow City Code, Title 4, Chapter 3, to allow ground floor residential uses within the Central Business Zoning District, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law.